Welcome. I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. A little later on, we're going to talk brew, something I actually know about. But first, the state of politics in Colorado from the Statesman. You know him, you love him. That Armani suit looks good on him. Ernest Luning, glad to have you.
Good to see you.
And from that most respectable journal, The Independent, Corey Hutchins, good to have you.
Thanks for having us.
All right. It is still 3 months off. 3 months in political world is a lifetime. But if the polls are any indication, Colorado is not purple anymore. For Hillary, it's leaning blue. Leaning blue seems to be the category. Am I reading those polls right?
You're reading those polls right, and even more recent polls since the convention show that Colorado's turning kind of deep blue. The polls that came out at the beginning of July showed Hillary Clinton in a 5 to 10 point lead over Donald Trump. Recent ones, private polling that the Republicans are looking at, show Hillary leading by 18 points in the state of Colorado. And that's Barry Goldwater territory.
I have a hard time at 18, but what, for me, the telling part was when Hillary pulled her advertising out of Colorado to send it to places like Pennsylvania, where I think she's in a fight. What do you see?
Well, it's not just the polls. The demographic data shows that Colorado, for the first time in 20 years now, has more registered Democrats than Republicans. That happened in July. There's about something like 14,000 more Democrats than Republicans registered in Colorado. However, if you dig into that a little bit, you find that if you look at active voters, the Republicans actually have about 8,400 more active voters. That's a big deal in an election.
But the Democrats have a whole lot more. Democrats have a whole lot more deceased voters, and that kind of balances that out.
Well, the real question is about the all-male election, because inactive voters and active voters makes a big difference, because an inactive voter is somebody that will not get a ballot in the mail, whether they live in Boulder or whether they faked moving to a friend's house in Colorado Springs.
Who are you speaking of?
I'm just kidding. But either way, still the largest voting block's unaffiliated voters, 1.3 million of those, and that's where the election is going to swing. So the question is whether those unaffiliated voters are more Republicans or Democrats.
Is this a done deal? I mean, if Trump was here, Pence was here, Hillary was here, I mean, those are nice for fundraising, but if these people are wise, they're in Florida, they're in Pennsylvania, they're in Ohio, so why are they coming to Colorado?
They could be getting it out of the way. From what I hear, the Republicans are pouring resources into the state this week, next week, the week after that. They'll see where the polls are. And Colorado's not going to get much love from the Trump campaign after that unless the needle moves significantly.
You know, from my point of view, this is such an odd year. Yeah. This ball could bounce in a lot of different directions, particularly if we have what I'm labeling fear events. If there's more terrorist attacks, if there's more shootings, if there's anything on the scale of 9/11, let me tell you, Trump comes roaring back into play, even in Colorado, which leans blue. You
look back at 2014, and Mark Udall's people would say that they were up early, and the polling didn't start breaking for Cory Gardner until late August, September, October. Rise of ISIS, Ebola turned into a national security thing. So yeah, that could happen again.
How does that work for the Senate race? I mean, here Colorado has the weakest incumbent for the Democrat side. If there was ever going to be a Republican pickup, it was supposed to be in Colorado. Darrell Glenn takes the nomination. Where is he in the polls? Where is he in fundraising?
Fundraising, he is not so good, but he was not so good during the primary either. And I think you talk to his campaign and they'd say, you know, we've won underdog races. We've done it before. We'll do it again. But we all know that a lot of money helps. And Michael Bennet has he had $6 million or something. Darrell Glenn just got about a $700,000, $800,000 ad buy from some group, and I am hearing from people that aren't political reporters that say, hey, I see this guy Darrell Glenn when I'm reading the New York Times online, I get his ad. So he is getting his name out there, but the Democrats, I think, are happy to have him to run against.
Why is that? Because they hate black people. Go ahead, say it.
No, I think he's just one of the furthest right candidates. And so they might view this as one of these Pyrrhic victories from a Tea Party flashback from 2010, where you win the primary, but you lose horribly in the general. And I think the Republicans would say, well, you got to put up a conservative for once. I guess that's what it'll come down to. We'll see what happens.
Well, this will be the test, but in 2010, the Tea Party-ish candidate, Ken Buck, won the primary over the establishment candidate, and went on to come within 1.5 points of unseating Michael Bennet.
And if Ken did make just a couple of blunders, gaffes.
I'm not sure how much those counted for at the very end there.
I think they had a cumulative effect.
The Meet the Press one, where he compared being homosexual to alcoholism, that was probably not what suburban women in the metro area wanted to hear, and that's where he lost the race.
What's different about, you keep talking about money, and I don't know how much money matters in a weird year like this.
That's a good question.
Yeah, no, totally.
Trump does not need to meet Hillary dollar for dollar. Everybody knows him. He doesn't have to educate people about who he is. They know him already. The press is going to give him more coverage in each one of the gaffes or blessings he makes. And you mentioned Darrell Glenn's advertisements online. Mm-hmm. There's a new generation that we don't watch TV anymore. And I know for consultants, man, buying TV ads, that's it. Because a lot of consultants get paid a fraction of what they buy on TV, so they make their money. But nobody watches commercials anymore.
Look what happened to Jack Graham, who put $1 million on television probably. Look what happened to Robert Plaha, who did the same. And Darrell Glenn did he did a ground game.
Small fraction of that, and it was through social media and through people talking to their friends.
Is that possible for the Senate run here? Does Darrell have that kind of help, or what are the polls saying?
Winning a Republican primary in a low turnout year, in a crowded field, is one thing. Beating a well-financed, well-oiled incumbent machine.
Calling Bennett drunk?
Well-oiled?
Yeah.
It might be.
I know his first ad was about craft beer.
Yeah, that was a good point. All right, so let me pull this on. So if I'm getting a picture of Hillary seems to be far ahead, you're telling me that Darrell Glenn is far ahead, and from what I understand,
Michael Bennet,
excuse me, that the RNC hasn't targeted Colorado as one of their possible pickups, so they're not going to be sending in a lot of air support for this. What looked like 6 months ago looked like the battlefield for the nation, that this was going to be a swing state for the president, a swing state for the United States Senate, and Bennett's already got $10 million plus stored away. There was going to be another $30–40 million of other people coming in just for those two races. And now, if what you say is true, that money goes away, giving a whole lot of air room, a lot of breathing room for things like the congressional races. If what you say is true, how is this affecting Kaufman?
A lot.
I mean, because this Senate race, just for people who don't know, this 6th congressional is not a conservative district. It was gerrymandered to be very friendly to Democrats, and Mike just did an incredible job last time. Campaigning, old-fashioned.
He's reinvented himself. He's taught himself Spanish. He spends hours every Sunday learning better and better Spanish, and he just released an ad that there's a Spanish version where he's talking to the camera, explaining that he's going to hold Donald Trump accountable if he wins the presidency, same as he'll hold Hillary Clinton accountable. He's the first congressional candidate in the country on the Republican side to distance himself from Donald Trump, and that's getting a lot of attention today.
But it says a lot about the district as well.
It does. It's an evenly divided district, and it's a district where Donald Trump is polling particularly poorly. The Republicans know that he's a drag on the ticket there.
And so for Kaufman, I'm gonna be tough on him. Mm-hmm. Does that work? I mean, if
It's a major test, and I think Republicans around the country are going to take a look at what the polling looks like, and more importantly, what voters are telling reporters like us when we go out there and start talking to people and see that. I mean, these campaigns, they research this stuff every day, right? They ask voters questions, and when you start seeing the candidate talking about the same thing over and over and over again, in 2014, it was how many TV ads did we see about abortion or personhood or women's reproductive health, right? It became, as the Denver Post called it, obnoxious at one point. Well, what are we hearing? Trump, 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 Trump from the Democrats, no matter what. They must be seeing something that says this is the only issue that we see we can actually move voters on. Let's use it. And it might have gotten Kaufman's ear. And he finally said, well, I'm going to confront this head on. And this isn't the first ad, by the way. This is the first ad directly where he said, that it's something to the effect of, I'm not a fan of him, or something like that. But he had an ad before that said, I'm a different kind of Republican. And that was kind of a subtle way of saying
kind of
that guy at the top of the ticket isn't.
Amazing thing about Mike, and all disclosure, he's a friend of mine, but Mike works like no politician I know. I mean, he pounds the pavement.
Hardest working guy in show business.
He is the hardest working guy in show business. And isn't it funny how quickly these things change?
Yeah.
That after taking Romanoff out last year, this was supposed to be the year that Mike Kaufman could take a weekend off.
Finally relax. Nope.
Not happening. Hey, there's another, before we run out of time, on the Western Slope, that looks like a tough race as well, which shouldn't be. Explain it to me.
Well, it shouldn't be. Scott Tipton is a decently liked incumbent. He hasn't really poked his head up in many places, but folks in the district like him. It's the Western Slope, San Luis Valley, and Pueblo is the district.
I mean, this is geographically a huge district.
It's one of the largest in the country, and it's also an evenly divided district, but independents there, even Democrats, lean conservative. So Republicans, the district actually in basically its current configuration has changed hands between Democrats and Republicans several times over the last couple of decades. So it's not naturally one or the other. But this year I think Scott Tipton has more of a race on his hands than he anticipated.
Because the West Slope Democrat is very different than the urbanist Democrat in Denver metro area.
Some of them even grow up to become Republicans, like Ben Campbell, who represented the district for a while.
We all grow up to become Republicans.
That's right.
You'll understand that someday, don't worry.
Sure.
Tell me about the opponent.
Democrat is Gail Schwartz, former senator, who represented a lot of a good swath of that district. So she's known there. She lives in Crested Butte, and the environmentalists like her. I think her opponent is using that against her, saying that she is anti-coal. And she has raised a lot of money, and that's, I think, what turns some heads in Washington, D.C. You talk to Democrats, and they say, we're trying to expand the map. We think this year is so weird because of the stuff we talk about, Donald Trump, just the volatile nature of politics, this or that. Democrats in D.C. believe that they're expanding the map across the country, and they're looking at districts that they might have taken a pass on or not really gotten their attention. And this is one that, they're basically calling us and saying, like, hey, get some coverage down on this race, because you're going to wake up on election day and be like, how did we miss this?
DNC calls you directly?
No, not directly, but we have...
the red phone, the Colorado Independent has a red communist phone.
You get like Democratic operatives that say, DC's paying attention, and that means like, oh, so is my story going to get linked on the Hill?
There we go. Corey, thank you. Ernest, thank you. Stay tuned.